Just a few months after he took over as the head of the Catholic Church in 2013, Pope Francis said the Church must be brothers with gay Catholics and asked, "Who am I to judge?" 5 years later, he invited LGBT advocates to the Vatican. And last October, he became the first pope to endorse same-sex civil unions, saying in an interview, homosexual people have a right to be in the family. They are children of God. But at every step of the way, the man known to some as the progressive pope has stopped short of showing support for same-sex marriage. And yesterday, Francis made it clear he has no plans to alter the Church's firm stance, signing off on a Vatican decree that ruled the Church does not have the power to bless same-sex unions. In it, the Vatican says to do so would be illicit, arguing God does not and cannot bless sin. It seems with every step forward in acceptance, the Church also takes a step back, leaving gay parishioners bewildered, or maybe not, about where they stand in this back-and-forth shuffle. Here to make sense of it all is my Boston Public Radio co-host, Margery Eagan, former columnist for the Globe's Catholic news site Crux, where she was recognized with first-place commentary by the Religion News Writers Association of America. Marianne Duddy-Burke is the executive director of DignityUSA. It's a nonprofit that focuses on LGBT rights and the Catholic Church. Marianne, it's great to see you again. And Margery, I saw you a few hours ago. Hello to you, too.
Hi, Jim.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. What's the Pope saying to your members, some of whom have been together for years, some of whom have kids? What's he saying to them?
You know, this statement sends a very sad and in some cases surprising and in all cases hurtful message to LGBTQ people and to Catholics in general in our church, to say to us that your relationships cannot be blessed. I mean, far short of marriage, you can't even get a blessing for your relationship, no matter how much good is in it, no matter how long you've been together, because it constitutes sin, is a very, very hurtful thing to come from our church.
What was surprising about it? You used that word a minute ago. What was surprising about what he did?
I think many Catholics will be surprised that this comes just a few months on the heels of all the reports that were out there about Pope Francis endorsing civil unions. And there was this great sense of hope that maybe we really are on the verge of something very different happening and, you know, the door opening for recognition of same-sex marriages. I think there's also been some awareness of the fact that the German bishops, among others, have really been pushing for the church to formalize some kind of recognition. So, you know, there was a sense that there could be something good coming, and instead, you know, we get called sinners once again.
Were you surprised in any way, Margery?
Well, Marianne just mentioned, I was particularly surprised at the word sin. I mean, really? We have to use the word sin? I mean, the Catholic Church is a discriminatory organization. It discriminates against gays, obviously. It discriminates against women. I think you might think it might come into the 21st century, but the Catholic Church is kind of like the country. There's all these right-wing conservatives. I think, unfortunately, too many bishops in America are in that group. They're right-wing conservatives. And then you have the liberal Catholics who I'm sure were sick and cringing about this kind of language because at the parish level, at my parish at Boston College, there's huge LGBT outreach. We have panels, we have discussions, we have many prominent members of the people that help at the church. The Catholic Church is just the hierarchy of the Catholic Church has disgraced itself in many ways. And to me, this is another disgrace, and particularly hurtful, is coming from Francis, who you might think, as you pointed out, would know better than to use such a horrible term as sin.
Well, you know, talking about the 21st century, Margery, let me put up a poll from Pew Research and talking about the leaders being out of step with their flock. It looks at 2001, and then we looked at every 5 years and then 3 years at the end. Support for same-sex marriage. The number of Catholics in this country who support it is exactly the same, 61%, as it is in the general population in the United States. So what explains this? That it's a bunch of old men who are out of touch, Margery? Is it because in Africa, where they're expanding, there is exactly the opposite view, not just about same-sex marriage, but about LGBTQ people. What explains it, Margery?
Well, you hear that excuse a lot, that we're trying to expand, Catholics are trying to expand in Africa, and that's a more conservative country. That does not cut it for me. To me, you set an example of the right way to go. Catholics are, the rank and file Catholics think differently than the Vatican on a whole bunch of issues, or these conservative bishops. Look at what they're saying, some of them, about don't take a vaccine because of fetal cell tissue. Well, not all, but I'm saying there is this.
Well, the Pope's been really good on that, by the way.
He has been really good on that, but you still hear this kind of thing. You heard people debating some, again, whether Joe Biden should be able to go to communion. What's really terrible about this is the Catholic Church, if it keeps in this route, will just shrink and shrink and shrink, because certainly my children do not want anything to do with a church that discriminates against women, discriminates against gays, talks about birth control in 2020. They are completely out of touch at the hierarchy.
And has not dealt adequately with sexual violence against kids. We just learned the other day in France, 10,000 cases of violent abuse were uncovered from 1950 on. You know, hypocrisy is one of my many obsessions, Marianne, even though I admit I'm guilty myself from time to time. But the guy who really called it out here, I don't know if you two saw this, Elton John did this Instagram post. Did you see this thing? In which he said, how can the Vatican refuse to bless gay marriages because they are sin, yet happily make a profit from investing millions in Rocket Man, a film which celebrates my finding happiness from my marriage to David? I mean, I'm the only non-Catholic in this threesome. I don't know if this is deeply held belief at all, but purely strategic, as I mentioned to Margery before. They're willing to make money off same-sex couples. They're just not willing to bless them.
Yeah. I think that the statistics you put up earlier are so important in this conversation, because I think that we have to keep coming back to the fact that the church is the people of God, and the people who make up the Catholic Church are incredibly supportive of LGBTQ people, of trying to do justice by many communities, and they get the fact that there is this hypocrisy. And I think more and more we're willing to call out our leadership on this, and either by turning away and going someplace else for spiritual sustenance, or by speaking up and making a point of this. And this is where LGBTQ Catholics do find blessing, is with their families, who will be at our marriages, who will welcome our partners into family gatherings, who rejoice when we bring kids into the families. And, that gap between the leadership and the people of the church is just going to continue to widen as stories like the Elton John investment come out.
Well, speaking of that gap, Margery, I'm short on time, but you and I have talked about this a lot. I was reading a New York Times story today from 2019 in which the New York Times estimated that anywhere from 35 to 75% of the priests in the Catholic Church are gay. I know you have a ton of friends who are priests. What does the Vatican statement say to them?
Well, it's pretty horrible. I mean, the hypocrisy is. Here's the sad thing: you have a guy like Jim Martin, who's a Jesuit, who's a very liberal Jesuit, who's written a book about accepting gay and lesbian people into the church, welcoming and all that kind of stuff. He spoke at my church about 2 years ago. We're not an empty seat in the place. Standing ovation at the end. And a couple from my hometown in their 80s went up to him afterwards to shake his hand. And they were in tears. And they said, this means so much to us because our son could not worship in our church because of discrimination against him because he was gay. They were in tears. This is what the church is doing. It's disgraceful. I mean, I think a lot of us are Catholics, despite the hierarchy, not because of it, because their moral authority is so watered down that they say something and I think a lot of us ignore it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt and it isn't horrible.
Margery, I only have 15 seconds. I think Marianne, you take it. You take the last 15 seconds, Marianne.
I think we need to hold the hierarchy accountable for the negative impacts it has, for youth who are coming out to be called sinful, for people who live in countries where there is no social or legal support for LGBTQ people, their lives could be at risk. And for everybody else, there's tremendous pain.
Marianne, it's good to see you. It's been a long time. I hope you're well. Thanks for your time. And Margery, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.